latest webinar organized by our institute to discuss specifically the impact of the coronavirus crisis on East Med and more generally latest developments on East Med gas. Today with us we have three top experts and executives in this field in the region. Dr. Gina Cohen, lecturer and consultant on natural gas industry in Israel. She's also a partner of IENE, and we're very pleased for that, and we welcome her very much. We have Dr. Charles Ellinas, who is going to join us in a minute from London. He's well-known expert and commentator on gas developments in the region. And of course, our dear friend Mathios Rigas, CEO of Energean Oil and Gas, based in UK, but currently in Athens. And very important and very successful track record in the oil and industry, and very soon we hope in the gas industry. So I won't waste any more of your time, but I will go straight into the first question, which is, how do you think that the coronavirus endemic has affected gas exploration and production activities in the East Med? Because we have seen lately several postponements by major companies, including ExxonMobil and Total, on exploration work, new drillings in the offshore area of Cyprus. We know also the impact on Prinos, and I understand also in Egypt, offshore Egypt, there are some negative impact. So how is this shaping up the picture right now of East Med gas? So can we go first to Gina Cohen?
Okay, well, in fact, I think I'll speak more about what is happening downstream rather than exploration, and maybe leave the exploration bit to Charles and Mathios. But it's all related, of course, because on the downstream, what is happening is that consumption has decreased. In Israel, the last couple of months, gas consumption has decreased by about 9%, and the gas companies are estimating between 9 and 15% reduction in consumption. Strangely enough, despite lots of announcements by the minister here in Israel that gas consumption has to increase, in fact, coal consumption has increased recently at the expense of gas, because coal is cheaper than gas even now, because the local gas prices are relatively high, except the prices that we're going to receive eventually from Energean. In Egypt, also consumption is lower than production, about 10 BCM a year lower than production, although the government in Egypt is forcing the companies to reduce their production, especially the high cost, deep offshore production areas in Egypt, and they're trying to buy more gas from the shallow waters and the desert areas. And the last point I'll say, and then I'll let my colleague speak, is that Egypt has not exported one LNG cargo since March because prices are too low. And this has a domino effect on exploration, on the downstream markets, on everything. The reason for that, of course, is because prices are too low, costs are too high in Egypt. And so this has impacted lots of the issues in the Eastern Med.
Gina, did I hear you well saying that the Egyptian government is urging companies to reduce their output? Is that right?
Yes. Zohr has been reduced considerably, and the other deep sea offshore fields in Egypt have been required very strongly to reduce production. I don't know if they've been reducing it. Maybe Charles knows if they've reduced it below take-or-pay or just at take-or-pay level. Production is being reduced because Egypt has got no storage, and because exports by LNG are not possible, and because demand in Egypt has fallen, or is below production capacity.
Okay, I think this is very clear, very interesting development, and we see what role gas storage plays. I mean, we've seen this very clearly in oil. Now we see it in gas. Let me now go to Mathios. Mathios, you are now developing a really very ambitious and very important project offshore in Israel. The two sister fields there, Tanis and Kanin. And I understand that despite all the problems globally with coronavirus and all that, you are on track. Can you please comment on that?
Yes, I think, first of all, thank you for hosting us, and it's great to be with IENE today. The coronavirus has undoubtedly affected the industry, but not so much on the operational front. As far as our operations are concerned, Prinos has continued to operate without any problems. Greece, of course, has been a country that hasn't been affected as badly by the coronavirus cases. In Israel, we have continued with the onshore part of the project, with the offshore installation, and at the moment, we are laying the pipelines in Israel, and with that, we haven't seen any effect. Our FPSO in China, the hull was completed on time. It moved to Singapore. At the moment, Singapore seems to be closed because Singapore is going through a second phase of coronavirus cases. So we have had a small delay at the Singaporean yard. I hope that as of next week, we are restarting and we're going to be back on track. So operationally, we haven't seen much impact from the coronavirus case situation. What has happened, though, in this industry is that the coronavirus evolution and the effect it had on the oil price has had a major impact on our industry. And the huge drop in oil price that we have seen recently, and to a large extent to the gas prices around the world, has had a result in every part of this industry. On the upstream side, we've seen projects being cancelled. We've seen thousands of layoffs. We've seen a lot of the majors cutting down on exploration, and we've seen a lot of the projects, as you mentioned, being postponed here in the East Med. We have seen majors in Greece, like Total, deciding to sell or exit from certain blocks. I'm referring to Block 2 in Greece that we have signed an agreement to take over. We have seen the wells in Cyprus being delayed. I'm sure Charles will give us more on this. As far as Israel is concerned, we haven't seen any impact because we finished all our drilling on time. So overall, the industry is affected mostly by the huge drop in the oil price that was caused by coronavirus, rather than operational difficulties that we faced.
I think that's very, very clear and very welcome news as far as Energean's involvement in this field is concerned.
Nothing can stop us, Costis. Coronavirus can't stop us, don't worry.
So now let's go to Charles in London. And Charles has been monitoring very closely developments in the region for many years, and having spent the time there heading the national oil company. So Charles, please, could you please give us your own viewpoint on what's happening in this Med with focus on
well, let's start with mobile. But with the proviso, if conditions allow it.
Mr. Ellinas, sorry, this is Simos Simeonidis, the moderator. If you could please close your second device, keep only one. Thank you.
I know my main device. You hear me now?
You can keep the second one if the first one doesn't work very well. One of the two will be fine. Thank you.
Okay, So in basically in Cyprus, the postponement by the companies has been made on the basis. You can hear me now, by the way?
Yes, now you're clear.
Okay. Has been postponed on the basis that they will resume next year if conditions allow it. In the meantime, in terms of Cyprus again, Noble, Delek, and Shell also now have gone back into reconsidering how to develop Aphrodite. We will discuss that later in more detail. But my concern about if conditions allow it is that I don't believe conditions will allow it next year. I think it will take longer. And as a result, I can see drilling delayed, and I am, as was originally planned, may not come back again. And we can discuss it in more detail later on. In Egypt, Gina summarized the situation. Clearly, ITCO is in trouble. It cannot export, and the problem starts from there. ITCO has been asking a price of LNG, and is not finding any buyers. I mean, the prices in Asia are down to $2. So, because ITCO cannot export LNG, Zohr has been forced to cut production to 1.5 billion cubic feet a day. That's in as a result of that, also IENE gas. I mean, storage is there for huge amounts of gas for long. So
Charles, we continue to have problems hearing you.
The other day.
Charles, we have a problem.
I have an internet connection problem.
Oh.
Can you hear me at all? Or?
Now we can hear you, yes. Please carry on.
So, as I said, IENE and Shell have also stopped drilling in Egypt, and the problem is sort of the problem is quite substantial in terms of gas and exports and gas production. In Lebanon, the first well drilled by Total was a failure, and no announcement has been made with regards to further drilling, probably in 2021. The oil companies are reviewing what they do, and it may not be straightforward in terms of how they're going in future.
Okay, now let me ask you a question while you're trying to fix the problem. I understand that before the coronavirus, 7 drillings were planned in the whole EEZ of Cyprus, and all of them have been postponed. Now, do you foresee that some of them will be scrapped altogether? Is this a possibility?
Really high possibility. The problem is that the drilling for confirmation drilling, the confirmed quantities in Galapagos and Calypso may take place at some stage when things return back to normality. But longer, it's what are they going to do with the gas? Because one of the things that we do need to discuss is where the IOCs are and the state of the global gas markets and prices, because that will is influencing what is happening now, will influence the future. And global gas markets and prices are not helping us, and they will not help us. There are good reasons.
Okay, would Gina like to comment on this, please? Can Gina comment on what Charles just said about the prices?
Well, it's very difficult to predict the prices. They are low now, but the term contracts are, of course, lower than the hub prices. What we see everywhere are the hub prices. The hub prices are very low. The term contracts in May in Japan were still around $9, and in April in Northwest Europe were still around $7. They are going down in Northwest Europe, June, July, August, September, to about $4 or $5, but then they'll probably go up again towards November, because the prices that are linked to oil prices have a lag of a certain months, either 3, 6, or 9 months. So now the oil prices are slightly higher, so the term prices will again be a bit higher than they are now, and certainly than the hub prices are now. So we tend to be confused a little bit by looking just at the hub prices, simply because those are the ones that are available for all of us to see in a very transparent manner. I think prices will be based more or less on what is happening in America. The floor price will be based on the cost of getting American gas into Europe, and the ceiling price will be based on the need for new development. Now, the Henry Hub prices in America are in fact increasing, because America is one of the only places where there's a negative correlation between oil and gas prices. The lower the oil price, the higher the gas price. Henry Hub prices going up a bit, and therefore, interestingly enough, already prior to the coronavirus, expectations had been that prices would be low, but now potentially within 2 or 3 years, the prices will be less low than they were expected to have been prior to the crisis, because of the Henry Hub potentially forming the channel between the floor and the ceiling prices. This is just to put an optimistic note on some of the things that are happening.
Okay. I will now turn to Mathios, who is really very dependent on his long-term contracts, which are financed and are financing this major undertaking for the development of the 2 gas fields. So my question to Mathios is the current price situation as far as gas is concerned. How is this going to affect your long-term operation in view of the fact that you have established long-term contracts in Israel and hopefully with Greece in the future? So could you please comment? And I understand also you have a number of slides that you would like to show. Okay, go ahead.
I will drop the slides. Don't worry, we can have a discussion here. So I think I want to comment a little bit on what has been said until now. And we that have been in this industry long enough know that oil and gas prices go up and down and keep changing. Companies that are committed to the countries and the projects that they operate don't get affected by short-term changes in the markets. When we took over the blocks in Israel, in Karish and Tanin, it was a saturated market, very well served by Noble and Delek, covered by Tamar, a big project coming, Leviathan, and everybody was telling us, you will never be able to penetrate this market. So we took a 2.4 TCF discovery that most people thought would be uneconomic and it would be impossible to develop. And we found a way to sign long-term gas contracts for the next 15 years, to finance them from banks, to sign a contract with Technip, to raise the money through the IPO we did, the equity that we needed in the London and the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and get the project done. So my message here is very clear. The companies that want to do projects, find a way and get them done. The companies that don't have our countries, and by our countries, because I consider all those countries as my countries today, Greece, Israel, Cyprus, Italy, Montenegro, Croatia, all the countries that we operate, when you want to do a project, you find a way to get it done. And this goes to Cyprus. And we're going to talk about Cyprus, and Charles mentioned about the major companies that may postpone or may never do those projects ever in the future. Well, Cyprus has had a discovery much bigger than the one that we took over in Israel. They had the opportunity to develop it, and they didn't. So this has nothing to do with the short-term situation of gas prices today, and I fully agree with the way that Gina analyzed the global market. We're in this for the long term. And if you're in a market for the long term, you're in for the good times and the bad times. So people and companies that are committed find ways to get things done. People that and companies that want to find excuses for not doing projects, of course, keep the blocks on the shelves, they keep options on blocks, and they keep asking governments to postpone and give delays for exploration licenses. So yes, gas prices are low. And if you were to take a decision today on a project based on a gas price like the one in Europe prevailing or in the Far East or the US, probably you wouldn't take the risk. But at the same time, our buyers, the power stations, the refineries, the chemical plants that are long-term players in their industries, they also don't take investment decisions based on the day. They take investment decisions that have a 15-year horizon, and they need to match their assets, their liabilities, and make sure that they have a well-covered and secured long-term contract. Now, what is going to change, and what has to change, is this market has to become interconnected to be able to become a normal global market. If that doesn't happen, and we remain a domestic market, just Israel, just Greece, just Cyprus, and we try to make projects on the back of the consumption of just Cyprus, for example, of course projects will never happen. So there has to be a way to connect all these markets to create a much bigger market that will allow companies to do what we do in the oil business, to hedge prices, because even today, projects get done. And if you want my view, the companies that are the smarter ones are the ones that will be developing projects today. Because today, the shipyards in the Far East are empty again. There are drilling ships that are available at very, very low prices. So any project that gets sanctioned in this market will make money. Any project that waits for the rebound of oil and gas prices will face the same problems again. So it's a long-term business. That's my message.
Mathios, I think you were very clear on this. It's an excellent and very clear message you are conveying about the importance and the viability of the gas market in the region, which I agree with you cannot be dependent on price fluctuations, which, as we know, are temporary, and it has to see on the long term. Nevertheless, Cyprus, from its end, views the global situation in a pensive way, in view of what is happening. And I'm going to come back to Charles to enlighten us a little further on the outlook for Aphrodite exporting gas to ITCU, and any follow-up drillings, new drillings, not the confirmation ones that are planned by Exxon and Total, about the new ones. So Charles.
I mean, first of all, let me just say that what I agree with Mathios that the future of gas in this Med is regional, not exports. I wanted to expand on exports because ITCU is based on exports, and Aphrodite sale to ITCU, it depends on exports. So if exports are not going to happen, as is very likely, or they're going to be subdued, as is very likely, then Aphrodite is not going to go very far. So Aphrodite at the moment is not moving. As you probably know, Delek is not quite on the verge of bankruptcy, but it's in real trouble. It has huge debts. It's trying to service its debts by selling assets, and it's struggling. Noble is in a similar situation, has suffered massively in North America as a result of its shale assets. In fact, at the end of the first quarter of this year, Noble announced a write-down of its assets, which led it to declaring a loss of $4 billion. and also announced cuts in spending of 50% this year and may do the same next year. So Aphrodite, so Delek, Noble and Shell have said they have to revisit Aphrodite, and I don't believe anything is going to happen. I don't see the future either. And we need to really look at this global markets situation. I will mention some numbers here. At the end of last year, prices were quite low, not as low as they are now. Low in the sense of in Southeast Asia, they went down to $5, and now they are $2. But let's go back to that $5. They were very low because there was too much gas, too much LNG in the markets. That situation is not going to change. At the end of last year, there was surplus LNG. This year, even though there are no new FIDs being taken, there is something like 37 million tons per annum new LNG capacity being added this year and next year. FIDs have already been taken for over 100 million tons per annum over the next few years. And Qatar LNG has confirmed it's going ahead with its two-phase project to add another 50 million tons per year to its LNG capacity. All of that is in excess of the expected increase in demand, which is expected to be anywhere between 100 to 150 million tons per annum by 2030. That means there is going to be too much gas, too much LNG onto the markets for the longer term. That means prices will be low. That means IFCO and Aphrodite have a problem. They have a challenge. So coming back to Mathios' presentation, which I think is on the right lines, we need to think regionally. We need to think interconnecting the countries. We need to develop the regional markets. But to do that, we also need to overcome the political problems which are dogging the region and the disputes and everything else. Without that, investments in regional infrastructure will not happen. And I think we need to talk about that later on.
Okay, Charles, I think what you said is clarifies a lot of the situation with regard to prices. But Mathios and yourself also mentioned the importance of interconnectivity.
Yes.
And coming back to Gina, and we have a very good example of interconnectivity with the new pipeline. I think it's a year old, connect. And so could you please tell us the experience in the operating this pipeline in a reverse flow for what it used to be many years ago? So
which pipeline? Which pipeline? You were cut off.
It's connecting Israel to Egypt. Israel is exporting gas now to Egypt, whereas for 50 years it was importing gas. So now we have a change of picture. But nevertheless, this is interconnectivity as far as I can understand.
Yes. Okay. Well, first I want to go back to a couple of things that Charles and Mathios said. Aphrodite was discovered in 2011, I think.
Yes,
and between 2014 and 17 and 18, Egypt imported huge volumes of LNG. And Cyprus, if it got its ducks in a row, it could have exported the gas at that time. Egypt was desperate for gas and paid high prices for LNG. And Cyprus is not strong enough to push Delek and Noble. And Delek and Noble are sort of playing them too strongly. And that's the main problem. On another connectivity, I think Greece actually just ratified in the government the progress on the Poseidon line. And I spoke to the Foreign Office here in Israel, to the man in charge of gas in the Foreign Office, and he said that Israel is about to ratify this agreement also to try and build a pipeline between Israel, Cyprus, Crete, Greece, and Italy. Italy is an interesting country because from all the hubs in Europe, I think the price in Italy is one of the highest. And in addition, Italy has no coal and no nuclear. So they're very dependent on both renewable and gas. So this is a very complicated project, but it has an option of maybe going ahead. Now, on the question that you asked, Israel indeed used to import gas from Egypt. until mid 2011, and then it ceased. It ceased for two reasons. The reason, which is always spoken about in the media, is because the line between Egypt and Israel was bombed a dozen of times. But the real reason is that Egypt did not have any gas. Didn't have any gas at the time, and it doesn't have. Well, now, as I said before, it does have some surplus gas now, and this is a little bit of a problem. But when Israel and Egypt signed a contract in June 2018, which was then updated in October 2019, to export gas from Tamar and Leviathan to Egypt, at that time, it was believed that Egypt would need large volumes of gas from Israel, especially in the summer. In the summer, there's a swing in demand in Egypt of 60% compared to the winter in Egypt. The Delek and Noble, who are the main operators of these two fields, announced 3 days ago, as did the Israeli National Transmission System Company, that volumes to Egypt and to Jordan have been reduced to a huge extent. They have not stated the figures, but they announced that the volumes were decreased by a huge extent. So there is a problem for now on exporting, as Charles says.
Okay. But Gina,
can I add something?
Costis, can I make a comment, please?
Yeah. Hold a minute. I'm coming back to you, both Mathios. The whole discussion started with the word interconnectivity. So we saw the first part of this, which is an actual project between Egypt and Israel and Jordan also. But there are several other projects, including the East Med. And of course, there are proposals by Energean to Cyprus to export gas to Cyprus. Now, as I see it, what the market will need long term will be the development of a really sub-regional market, that is Israel, Cyprus, Egypt, Jordan, maybe Lebanon when it comes in. And I can see the basis of such a market there. But there are problems, and Mathios will tell us one of these problems when he tried to export gas to Cyprus. Mathios.
I'll talk to you about the problems to export gas to Cyprus, but I will start with something which is more fundamental. Cyprus had the benefit of being one of the first in the region to discover gas. As we discussed before, Aphrodite was discovered in 2011. So instead of bringing this gas to the country, even today, people are discussing to take this gas through a pipeline to Egypt, liquefy it, put it on a ship, bring it back to the country and regasify it.
Sorry.
I mean, I'm sorry, but you're laughing and you're absolutely right to laugh. This is nonsense. So anybody that comes up with these ideas, I don't know what they have in mind, but if a country has found gas like Israel, the first thing you do is to bring the gas to your country and make sure that you stop burning diesel. So Cyprus today, in 2020, in the year where everybody's talking about climate change, about moving to greener environments, is still burning diesel. And it has 3 major gas discoveries. So people need to put some sense into all this. Now, Cyprus is a small market. And of course, yes, you're absolutely right. We saw this craziness and we said, we have an FPSO, which is 200 kilometers away. And within a year and a half, we can lay a pipeline and supply gas to the island at very competitive prices. And we heard again that no, we prefer to spend $800 million to buy our own FSRU. Now, Israel has an FSRU as a backup to the gas produced by Tamar, Leviathan, and then us. Greece is planning to build an FSRU and has a liquefaction or a regasification plant as a backup, as another entry point from pipelines. Why on earth would you want to have a main entry of gas through an FSRU? I don't understand, but that is something that you need to address the Cypriot government. Reality is Cyprus has gas. If Cyprus wanted, they could have developed this asset. And if the development of this asset through Noble and Delek was wanted to get this project done, they would have got it done by now. And I can tell you that we have half, or maybe a little bit more than half, the project in Israel, and we got it done in 12 months from the day we got it from the Israeli government. So I come back to what I said before. If people want, they can do. So let's stop at this, because people are talking about, the need for an East Med gas pipeline, LNG prices to come up, and the world to change, politics to be fixed, Turkey to stop doing what they're doing in the East Med. Reality is Cyprus has gas. The first thing they should have done, in my view, in my very humble view, is to develop their own resource for their own country. The rest, of course, is long-term discussions. We talk about the East Med gas pipeline. It's a huge project. It has been ratified by Greece. It will be ratified by Israel. We don't know if Italy is going to join. I hope they do. We have signed an agreement to be part of this project and supply gas, because without a supply of gas, the project will never happen. The gas can be competitive when it lands in Europe, not in today's prices. But again, this is not just a discussion about today's prices. It's the long term, and it's also a matter of how much Europe wants to rely on Russia. So there are strategic reasons, there are political reasons, as Charles correctly said, that need to be taken into consideration, not just today's gas prices in this market.
Okay,
So,
I think, Mathios, you were very clear. Now we go to Charles. Charles, you wanted to say something.
No, I mean, we do need to separate between politics and commercial factors. I mean, the interconnector you mentioned between Israel and Egypt, and also between Israel and Jordan, these projects were highly politically driven. As a result, both of them are running into some kind of challenges. I mean, for example, Egypt now is curtailing its own gas production, which is cheap. Zohr is producing at half its capacity, but is obliged to import gas from Israel at $6 per million BTU or more. I mean, Gina knows the numbers, but it's immaterial how accurate the number is. It's a high price. The pipeline to Jordan is highly challenged by the political situation. If annexation of the West Bank takes place, God knows what is going to happen. There are, Mathios put forward the potential projects in Cyprus. Aphrodite had 3 serious opportunities to be developed. When I was there myself, we actually started detailed negotiations on contracts to develop an LNG plant at Vasilikos in 2012, end of 2012, progressed it to the early 2013 to the point that Noble descended with all its lawyers and everybody else to negotiate. We started negotiations, elections took place, government changed, and the whole thing was put on ice for the best part of 2013. By the time the government was ready to come back to it, everything changed. The project went away. In May 2013, Noble came with another idea. It came with the idea of bringing a floating platform, a used floating platform to produce enough gas for Cyprus needs. That offer was allowed to expire without being taken up by the government. And then in December, they came back with a third idea, which was to produce the gas offshore and bring it onshore and to the islands of Greece using CNG. That was also rejected. So it's not because Delek and Noble didn't try. They tried. The political situation didn't allow these things to happen. And I'm afraid it's politics that often in our region interferes with projects. And it's what is happening now. Cyprus, as Mathios said rightly, has all this gas, and it's about to embarking into a ludicrous project of building permanent facilities for a tiny amount of gas, about 0.7 BCM per year. We're buying a massive FSRU, we're building permanent facilities for 0.7 BCM per year. And we have the offer by Energean to bring the gas. Karish. We have also one offer from Cohen to lease an FSRU at minimal cost, which will be basically the cost of LNG plus about $1 on top for the FSRU and profits and so on. We are not following this up,
Yeah.
despite the fact. Sorry.
I say that, Charles, we have discussed this extensively, and you're very justified in your expression of not, I would say, anger, but curiosity. And now I can see this project, the FSRU project, as a real impediment for future gas development offshore Cyprus, because if Cyprus will get this FSRU operating and will become sort of comfortable with this situation, they will never want to bring any gas from offshore.
Not just comfortable, to recover the investments, it will take at least 10 years. That means and it's not just that, Costis, it's not just stopping the development of gas offshore Cyprus and bringing it to Cyprus, it's also stopping the development of renewables. Because as you can imagine, if you were to divert 40% of the power needs into renewables, that means 40% imports of LNG, and the cost per unit that goes up almost doubles.
We have a question now. We have a question addressed to all panelists from Mr. Sohbed Karbuz. Some of them you may know, who is with IRENA. And his question is this: Egypt and Jordan are currently oversupplied, and yet they have gas SPAs with Tamar and Leviathan. What will they do with that gas this year, volume-wise and price-wise? Would Gina like to comment on that?
Hi, Sohbed. Jordan is not over capacity with gas. It doesn't have any gas of its own, zero gas of its own. So its only other alternative, it is to buy gas from Qatar via Shell, and that price has been high. It's been over $7. But the price it's getting from Israel is cheaper, and it's also safer because it comes from a pipeline about 20, 30 kilometers away. And Israel would never cut off the gas to Jordan. So Jordan and Egypt are totally different cases. The problem with Jordan, like Charles said, is the geopolitical situation just now with the new government here threatening to potentially annex some of the West Bank. So that's going to cause a problem for Jordan. But just recently, the parliament tried to renege on the gas contract. But the court in Jordan said absolutely not, said the contract is important and is continuing ahead. With Egypt, as we discussed it at length, and I think you're an expert on Egypt, indeed, Egypt has too much gas. We've been discussing this. They've told their own companies to cut production. And as per the contract that they have with Israel, they can also cut imports of gas from Israel. If the price of oil is below $50 a barrel over a year, they can cut the ACQ, the annual contract quantity, by 50%, and they're doing this. So this year, really, Egypt only needs to import 1 or 2 BCM of gas from Israel to be compliant with the contract. Since Egypt is consuming about 60, 65 BCM a year, 1 or 2 BCM is not a huge amount to take in, considering that it has geopolitical benefits for Egypt. And in addition, it has benefits on the gas front from Egypt, because Egypt wants to become a hub. In order to become a hub, it has to import and export gas. This is a good option for it to import gas. In addition, in the past, Egypt has been burnt by companies cutting production when prices were too low. So this is an extra source of supply, an extra security of gas to Egypt. So on small volumes, I think Egypt will continue to buy gas from Israel.
Mathios, would you like to comment on the same question by Mr. Karbuz?
I fully agree, and I don't want to repeat what Gina said. We are present in Egypt, and we are producing gas through the Abu Qir field that we have bought through the Edison acquisition. So I know the market very well. It's exactly as Gina described it. I also agree that I don't think that it's going to be, they will cut completely the import of gas from Israel. The real question is the producers that relied on this export of gas with 1 BCM, what are they going to do 1 or 2 BCM a year? That is the big challenge. Because Egypt and Israel, for political reasons, in my view, will continue the flow of gas. But projects the size of Leviathan are very difficult to survive on the back of 1 or 2 BCM. So there has to be other sources, other contracts and other uses of their gas. That's the biggest challenge, I think, in this part of the world now.
Charles, you want to comment on this question by Carbuz?
No, I think between them, Gina and Mathios covered it very well. I don't want to keep repeating things. Let's move on to other things.
I'd like to put a question to Gina. Could you enlighten us on what is happening with the Leviathan Phase 2 development?
Well, I think for now, it's going to be on hold for a while. I don't like talking in other people's names, but indeed, you know, the capacity of Leviathan is 12 BCM a year. They're probably selling to Jordan about 2, and to Egypt maybe 1, 1.5, 3.5. The local market is taking 2 or 3 BCM from them, and there's a huge competition in what is happening in the local market this year between Tamar and Leviathan, because Israel Electric Corporation has a contract to buy gas from Tamar at a high price. The price is $6.4 an MMBTU. But since Tamar was the only producer until now, IC took more gas than the take or pay. And therefore now in 2020 and 2021, IC is able to reduce the volume that it takes every year. I'm not revealing anything confidential here because it has come out in the stock market. IC can reduce its take from Tamar to 1.75 BCM in 2020 and 2021. It needs about 3.75 BCM a year in the next few years. So it made a competitive bid for short-term spot gas prices between Tamar and Leviathan. Both Tamar and Leviathan offered the same price, $4.79. IC wanted diversity and decided to buy gas from Leviathan. Tamar, which lost on both fronts because it lost its high $6.4 price in the long-term contract and lost the spot contract, reconnected with IC and said, we'll make you a better offer. And they have made an offer to sell gas to IC at $4.03. And so there's a big competition between Tamar and Leviathan. And these are the non-Delek and non-Noble partners in Tamar. And very potentially, IC will buy some of this gas, some of this spot gas from Tamar. And the second thing that IC has just done, it has just bought 9 cargoes of LNG. 2 cargoes it has already used. It's got another 7 cargoes that it's going to use between now and September at low prices. There's 9 cargoes together, average $3 an MMBTU. This is going to be mostly at the expense of the short-term contract from Leviathan. So phase 2, I think, will take some time.
It's at a standstill, right? And very understandably. Now, I'd like to raise the issue of gas hubs, which some of you mentioned. I mean, Egypt becoming a gas hub and all that. Now, I think it is a question of semantics, first of all, to be very clear what we mean by gas hubs, because many people have different ideas of gas hubs. I mean, one is the physical and the other one is the virtual. And as far as Europe is concerned, it relies a lot on the virtual gas hubs who are making the gas prices. It has 2 physical ones in Zeebrugge and I think in one more. But really, the price formation throughout Europe is determined from the operation of these virtual gas hubs, which have about 10 operating all over Europe. Now, to establish such a hub in the region, which I see that's the only possibility, it requires a lot of imports and exports and high market liquidity. And high liquidity right now, as I can see in what you said, is available in Israel and is available in Egypt. But if you were to move to 1 or 2 gas hubs, there will have to be some kind of cooperation and understanding on the on the reference base for establishing such hubs. So, Gina, which you have studied this issue for a while, please tell us what you think.
So maybe hub is the wrong terminology for what is happening in the area. In Europe, the hubs are more like a pricing region.
Right.
So the hub prices in Egypt are formed based on either clearing houses or price reporting entities that report thousands and thousands of transactions happening on every minute. If you look at the main hub, the TTF hub, it trades in about 15 times more gas than the amount of gas consumed in the whole world. So this is more like a price formation kind of hub. What we're talking about here, I think you're right, is more like a transit. So Egypt would like to be they want to be a hub, but they have to be less ambitious and just be a transit to buy gas from Israel, from Cyprus, to re-export it maybe sometimes to Israel, to Jordan, to export it as LNG. They're the only country that has for now both an FSRU for importing. They have a pipeline to Israel and to Jordan that can work on both ways, and they have 2 LNG export facilities. So they have the physical infrastructure capable of becoming a transit. They don't have any storage, and that is also important. So yeah, probably in my view, they want to become a transit country rather than a real hub.
Okay, Mathios, we are very soon going to enter into this regional gas market. I think you said you're already operating in Egypt, the field, but now you're going to become more involved in Israel as you will be producing and selling. How do you see this situation related to hubs?
Well, I'll tell you my experience in Greece. In the last 12 years, I've been with 13 ministers of energy, and I think 7 or 8 prime ministers. Everyone I met always said that they want to make Greece a hub. So everybody wants to be a hub in life for some reason. Now, in order for anyone to become a hub, you said it before yourself, you have to have connectivity to various markets. You have to have pipelines, you have to have FSRUs, you have to have gas storage projects, you have to have the logistics to be able to transit gas in and out. That is the definition of a hub. So for that to happen, we need infrastructure. And infrastructure means LNG terminals, FSRU terminals, pipelines, gas storage projects. And you know the gas storage project in South Kavala in Greece, we've been discussing about this for over a decade now, and it still hasn't happened. I hope this time it will happen. So these are the type of infrastructure projects that need to be created to allow any country, it doesn't matter if it's going to be Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, or Greece, or Italy, or any other country, to be a hub. Okay. So that's the bottom line. We need big investments in infrastructure. Now, before we move to the next point, I want to make one point on Gina's previous remarks about competition in Israel. She mentioned that there's fierce competition, and in the last IEC tender, Tamar and Leviathan submitted an offer of 4.79 to the second decimal point, exactly the same. If you call this competition, then we need to redefine the word. But okay. Energean is coming. And I think what we brought to the market is the real competition that Gina is referring to. And we brought prices that came down. This is exactly what countries need. They need a proper open market where gas prices, oil price, or any price is being bid by the market makers. And
okay. As we're reaching the end of this session, I would like to have some closing statements from each one of you. As I've seen this, we covered a lot of ground. We covered exploration drilling. We covered development of fields. We covered the gas transmission from country to country and locally. And lately, we discussed prices and the support mechanisms of hubs, etc. So my feeling is that a lot of things are happening in the region. Several projects are moving. Whether somehow these projects are going to be brought together, it will have to do with how the global situation is developing in terms of gas needs and gas consumption. So as I can see, the region is vibrant despite all the problems of coronavirus or financial dues, and the basis is there. Now, can you please comment how you review the situation overall in view of what we discussed? Gina.
I think I'll leave the overall view to Mr. Rigas. I'll just say two things. I think that what has to happen in Israel, I think the gas prices have to fall, and they will fall once Karish is online. But they have to fall in order to be able to make the interconnectivity with the other countries. And for the prices to fall, two things have to happen. The gas companies have to agree to take lower prices, and the government has to agree to take lower taxes.
Okay. Right. You're very clear. Charles.
I think we need to be careful, Costis. You said the region is thriving and it's vibrant. I mean, I don't see it, but I don't know where that is coming from. However, I mean, one thing we didn't have time to discuss is environmental factors and the Green Deal that the European Union yesterday pushed very hard. And it's going to have a massive impact in Europe, but also on the region as well, eventually. Anyway, we have to be positive. I agree. We have to look at the future positively. But energy plans of the region must be revised and be redirected to reflect the new realities, which are not going to go away. The new realities will not disappear next year because coronavirus has gone away. A lot of these realities were deep-rooted before coronavirus came, and they will continue. And we need to take a more realistic view of the future of EastMed gas, not inflated views as we currently have. And I think we need to resolve our problems. We have a lot of disputes, a lot of problems. I mean, take, for example, Greece and Turkey right now. Both of them are suffering massively as a result of previous problems, but now coronavirus, economies of both countries are in difficulties, and yet they're expending huge amounts of effort and capital and political capital in creating disputes among themselves and being continuously at loggerheads. If the region is going to resolve these problems, I think Greece and Turkey must take the lead somehow and in rapprochement and find a way forward. Then we can hope to resolve the problems of the region, which will then unlock these regional markets. Without resolving the problems, we will be fragmented, and we're not going to get the best out of this future, which has to be regional. Such a development can also help Cyprus resolve its own problem, because right now, after so many years, we're still nowhere in resolving the Cyprus problem. And if nothing happens from outside to help it move forward, it will stay for that much longer. Lebanon is a disaster area. The economy of Lebanon is free fall, and it needs to get to grips with its economic problems. It needs help. And Egypt's aspiration to become a regional hub, as you said before, I believe is a distraction. It's meaningless for the region. We are nowhere near the idea of a hub. None of the prerequisites is being satisfied. So Egypt should put that aside and give priority to its domestic energy markets and renewables. It has a lot of potential with renewables. The region has potential with renewables. We need to find ways to move forward to combine these things.
Okay.
And there are options. There are options, but we're not exploring them.
Let's go to Mathios.
Well, I will give you the business perspective in all this, since we heard different views. And I will go back, and I think, Costis, you remember when we started back in 2008, Energean, you were one of the first to visit with me the facilities in Prinos. You remember those days. We started from a very small company with 2 million barrels. Today, we're sitting on 800 million barrels of reserves and resources, present in 8 countries. The largest E&P company listed on the London Stock Exchange, on the FTSE 250, listed on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, and present in 8 countries in the Mediterranean at the moment, after the acquisition of Edison E&P. We are investing $2 billion in this part of the world. So I have to say that we have to be optimistic. Otherwise, we would be crazy to invest this amount of money in this part of the world. So I think I agree with what, with both what Gina said, that what is required is an understanding of the situation by both the governments and the markets to bring lower gas to the consumer. I fully agree with what Charles said, that we need to resolve political issues, but we also need committed companies that have the East Med as a top priority area. Otherwise, people will come and go, as we've seen many times before.
Okay. I think we're reaching the end of this time-wise. I just wanted to, before thanking you all, to say that I still believe that the area is very promising. I do not completely agree with Charles, who says that we have, first of all, to resolve our problems, for example, between Greece and Turkey. Of course, we have to, but the countries can go ahead and develop the resources even if such problems are unresolved, because there's a lot of geographical area which is outside disputes, as we all know. So this cannot be a type of excuse for not going ahead. So I still think that the region is very positive. I would agree with Mathios, and also want to thank you all for taking the time to participate in this webinar. We have about 55 people watching us. There were about 85 who registered, so maybe at some time there were more. But nevertheless, I think there's a lot of good quality information came out of this. If you agree, we are going to have this put on the YouTube, so for everybody to be able to see that. So we're going to write to you and ask for your consent to do that. And if you read this, we'll be able to go there. So once again, thank you very much. Wish you have a nice weekend, and we'll be in touch very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.